Okay, so yeah, tell me a little bit about Al Nada.
Yeah, so Nahda is Arabic for the awakening, and this track is inspired by Egyptian film director, filmmaker Yusuf Shaheen. I was writing a book about him and just inspired by his aesthetics and politics and ethics, and then I composed this piece.
Okay, great. All right, here we go. Nice. Hmm. 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 Cool. That took so many turns.
Mm, mm,
It started out very, I think it was like it's like an e piano or
hmm
something with kind of a bell-like sound.
hmm
Yeah, playing in like this major key. It was like kind of sweet. I could imagine it in a film for sure.
mm,
It was a little bit like nostalgic and tender.
mm,
And then the drums came in, and then this synth that had a
mm,
lot of reverb. it really like it suddenly expanded the world because
Mm,
everything felt very closed and intimate, and then it just like got big. And
mm.
from there, it was like spiraling out into the universe. It was just like really cool. The I'm not sure I've ever heard a melody harmonized with, I think it was like a whole step
Mhm.
apart. You know, typically parallel harmonies are like thirds or fifths or fourths or sixths or things like that or octaves, but you had this like close harmony,
Yeah,
and damn, I loved that. That was so
it's
cool.
a little dissonant, but it sounds cool. Yeah.
Yes, yes, it was very cool, and it was kind of playful, and there was almost this like a slightly absurdist quality to things.
Mm, nice. Yeah, I could
And
see that.
uh
Almost like
yeah.
circusy a little bit.
But I like the slow groove, and yeah, all the textures that kind of came in later. The another synth that came in that reminded me of sort of the more maybe like 80s,
Hmm.
90s synth pop sound that we've heard a little bit in some of your other
Hmm.
tracks. And yeah, that was a really cool one. I was not
Yeah,
expecting it to turn into what it did. That was great.
yeah. I do play a lot with nostalgia, so I think you captured it with the when you said that.
Awesome. So
Uh,
next, oh,
I will
sorry.
play Amphibian, right?
Yeah, so now
So
we'll go
that
to
one,
Amphibian.
yeah, that one is kind of like one of those tracks that, the ones that you kind of they're very playful and you feel in the moment, spur of the moment, just like an idea that's a crazy idea and you realize it and it's kind of like almost like a drug. That's all I
Mhm.
would say.
Okay. All right, I'm ready. Here we go. okay, so many things before I forget.
Okay.
Okay, so the bass line had a lot of movement. I remember in the beginning had
Mm,
a lot of movement, and whereas the melody was slower moving or more
mm,
static. I thought that was interesting, and it so had this very liquidy feeling. And then
mm,
there are moments where you had a pattern in your bass that was like, I don't know, maybe it was like 5 beats or 7 beats long or something, and it wasn't lining up right with the main beat. So you had this cool polyrhythm,
mm,
like a da 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 or da 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 da. I really enjoyed that.
mm,
And then I noticed that the bass faded out, which was really interesting.
mm,
And the whole middle section was bassless, and it was more about the melodies. Oh, also in the beginning, I would say it sounded like you were using a Lydian mode, which
mm,
yeah, it feels so expansive and curious and
mm,
playful and kind of just out of the world. I don't know. There's something very magical about
mm,
Lydian.
mm,
I was really enjoying that feeling. And then at some point, slowly, everything morphed
mm,
so that at the end, we were in like, I don't know, either a major key or a minor key or something. And there was this descend or ascending line that was kind
mm,
of pushing everything up and everything was harmonizing with it. So that was like this through line throughout
mm, mm,
the fabric was this ascending line. And it was really exciting to hear it get to the top at the very, very end. I also noticed that you had these drums, the hi-hat for a lot of the song was doing what I can only imagine was like really fast triplets or something. It was
mm,
just like it was really fast, but I could feel that it had a trip. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but it felt like it had like a
mm,
triplet
mm,
feeling or something like that. And that was cool. I don't hear that a lot. And then, but
mm,
then near the end, I noticed that it was on the eighths or sixteenths or whatever.
mm,
And so one of the things that I found interesting about this one is that it morphed,
mm,
and it morphed from like from the way it sounds at the beginning to the way it sounds at the end. Maybe instrumentation's not too different,
mhm.
but everything else about it feels fairly different to me. And it
Yeah.
happens in a way that I couldn't really perceive it changing. I just
Mm.
noticed at the end, I was like, wait a second,
You
where
didn't see
am
that
I?
coming.
Yeah, that was
But
really
for
cool.
me, it really, like you can follow an idea, like the idea of a fast-moving amphibian and probably evolving over time too, like going from
Yes,
water to land and just
exactly.
like going behind that feeling and trying to capture it with the composition, really.
Yeah, very cool. I like that one.
So NYE New Year's Eve, that's it captures the last New Year's Eve and how I felt on New Year's Eve, basically. Yeah.
Mm, okay. Okay, so this one was dancey.
Yeah,
Felt
and dark
dancey.
dark at the same time.
Yes. So there's this maybe sample or something that almost sounded like a voice.
Hmm.
Yeah. And but like voices, I would say. It
Yeah.
almost sounds like voices. So I heard it early in the song, but it's also like really clear during this da 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 line. That kind of
Hmm.
feels like maybe the almost the theme of the song.
Hmm.
And that made me feel like there's a like just made me think of like people, like crowds or something, or like
Mm.
there's a collective. And then, but the scale you used is, so many different names: Phrygian dominant, Hijaz, Persian
Mm.
Phrygian, Spanish Phrygian, or the Persian scale, Spanish Phrygian, la la la. But yeah, it has that dark da da da, but then it has that warm, twisty major third da da
Mm.
da 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 da. So that was and the way you crafted the theme, kind
Mm.
of going down pieces of the scale and then coming back up a little lower. And so you kind of cover the whole scale with that theme and
Hmm.
really embody its sound. But you can hear it in every other part of the song too. But it's kind of like it is you can't separate the song from that scale. It is like
Absolutely.
a very integral part of the feeling. But yes, I will say it did sound kind of like even aside from the scale, which has some a little bit of darkness with that da da da, but like
Yeah.
not necessarily that it is a dark scale, but there's something else about the song that did feel kind of dark. I wasn't sure exactly the emotions you were expressing, but
Yeah.
it didn't feel completely like celebrate. There was
Yeah.
something else going on under the surface
Yes.
that put me on edge a bit.
Exactly.
You had a sound kind of near maybe the middle end that was like almost sounded like a whistly, screamy synth or something. It
Mm.
was pretty
Mm.
high pitched, and it would like kind of jab in on an offbeat, and then it would land, and it
Yeah.
would jab in on an offbeat, and I was like, that feels actually scary. Like there's
Yeah.
something not right,
It's like
something.
knives, almost sounds like knives to me.
Mm, yeah, I could see that for sure. Yeah, it felt dangerous, a little bit
Yeah.
dangerous.
Yeah, it's
So,
like being at a New Year's Eve party, which we were, and then it's like you're dissociating at the same time. You're in the
oh,
party, there's a lot of people, but you're not really in the vibe. So you're you're in your own vibe and
mm,
basically capturing that feeling of being singular in a way.
interesting, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow, very cool.
So the next two are kind of my favorite, and they're ending the album. So Whiplash is a very short piece that's rhythmically is very challenging to play. Um, but it's so much fun. One friend, the guitarist who plays on the piece, said that it's kind of like if Mars Volta and Nine Inch Nails had a baby.
Oh, that sounds fun.
So yeah.
Okay, great. Here we go. Hmm. Okay, I
It's really
noticed.
trippy.
Yeah, yeah, I noticed. Uh, okay, a few things. So the okay, so that that synth sounds to me like it has like a. It does remind me of Nine Inch Nails because not just the tone of it, but also that there's a harmony like in the synth that's a tenth
Yeah.
above it, a major tenth. And when I hear that, I immediately think of like some of the stuff in the Downward Spiral and the
Mm.
Hate Machine. I guess he had some synth that I don't know, it did that a lot.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Like closer, there's a da 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 da, and it ascends, and those all those major tenths create this really interesting chromatic sound that's
Mm.
it's also warm and human at the same time. And then over that, it almost sounded like shoegaze guitar in that
Mm.
it just was like washed in reverb, kind of drowning and in the distance. Uh, but I really enjoyed that sound. And then your drums were interesting. So sometimes they sounded almost like glitchy, a little bit
Mm.
glitchy, like, yeah, kind of electro glitchy, almost like a
Yeah.
bit minimal. And then other times they sounded, I mean, it sounded like a kit, but
Yeah.
the
It's a live
patterns.
drums
Okay.
mixed with electronic drums.
Okay. Yeah, 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 for sure. The live drums. The patterns were creative. Like it wasn't just some like basic four on the floor drum
Mm.
beat. It had a lot of syncopation and a lot of stopping
Exactly.
and starting kind of feelings.
Mm.
And it was cool because I still don't know where the like downbeat is of this song. I
Mm.
kind of gave up pretty quickly. I was like, "Oh, I don't
Yeah.
know. I'm just gonna feel this in a different way."
Yeah.
But I couldn't really like tap my foot the way you were because I just couldn't orient myself. So that was kind of a neat, it's always a neat feeling where you're like, I know there's a pulse, but I
Yeah.
can't find it.
Yeah.
Um, there's different pulses that you could latch onto depending
Mm.
on how you hear it. And so there's like different angles that you could
Yeah.
hear it through. Uh,
The bass was kind of like the main guide, obviously,
yeah.
for the whole thing, and everything was kind of constructed around that. But it had a weird feeling to it, and it's actually because Nick, the guitarist, it's the first one we recorded together on the album. And I started with this one, which was the weirdest place to start, but it kind of set the tone for everything we did after that.
Mm, cool. Yeah, it's a cool mood. So next is Portals, right?
Yeah, so last but not least is Portals. This one is definitely one of my favorites compositions on the album. So that's why I left it till the end, based on a good friend's recommendation too. And really captures, I think, there are many styles, but like if there's an essence to my style, probably it's captured in this piece.
Mm, okay, here we go. Awesome. I think this was my favorite one.
Really?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Lots of polyphony there.
Mm. It's just really beautiful. It had that kind of um poignant, dark, serious minor key feeling to me. And the beat was really nice. It just had how do I describe it? It's kind of like a slow hip hop beat or something with a
Mm, mm,
nice groove, nice drum sounds, and the the bass line or the kind of the chords were really like they had this consistency to them that allowed a lot of playing above
mm,
them, different melodies. You have sort of the first melodies, then you introduce some new ideas, and by the end, we're kind of this other idea of the da 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 da,
mm,
and I really enjoyed hearing kind of the different permutations of that as you went higher and
mm.
higher. It was so pretty and yeah, there's just something very like just felt so meaningful. The let's see, just remind myself because I have. Oh yeah, so the synth sound is cool to me
Mhm,
because it sounds voice-like.
mm,
I could easily imagine someone singing that. It has a little
right.
bit of the tone of just a human voice.
Mm,
I always have enjoyed that sound. It was really,
mm,
really pretty. It also felt like the just sort of the structure of it had a very gratifying flow. Just the way
mhm,
you built the energy, the way the themes led into each other.
mm,
It was had this, I don't know how else to describe it, but it had this almost this tightness to it.
mm,
Interestingly
mm.
enough, it looks like it might be one of your longer songs, but it didn't
Yeah,
feel that way. It felt very, it was very tasteful. It had a very, yeah, it was really well done. All the different layers. And it can, and
yeah,
you still have this section, maybe near the middle, where something really noisy almost
yeah.
felt guitar like, but I don't know.
There's
But
guitar, yeah.
okay,
So there's guitar building up crescendo.
yes, yeah, it's
Yeah,
kind of building and building, and it got to a point where it was like started drowning the song,
yeah,
and I could feel the tension in my body when that was
yeah,
happening of like,
yeah.
oh my gosh, and then it kind of broke into something that had a
Going
lot
back
of
to the
clarity
melody.
and sparkle.
Mm,
Yeah, yeah. So that was a neat feeling. I always like feeling like the music is pulling me around,
yeah,
you know, like
yeah.
I'm at its mercy. And
I kind of think of Journey. Like I like to think of like an epic journey, almost
yeah,
like cinematic, like
right,
story,
right,
right?
exactly. Very much so. I think that's a great term to describe your music, despite the genres but I
Yeah,
do think that for the most part, everything does feel quite cinematic and like a
yeah.
narrative, like there's a
And
narrative.
some people say progressive for that reason because progressive music has that element of like changes, right? Um, it's kind of like keeps moving forward,
Right, right,
right?
right. Very much so.
Because
Yeah.
I think about it that way as opposed to cycling. Like, there are things that repeat, but I want to kind of m move the story forward in a kind of almost linear way, and sometimes non-linear, but
That's true, because I mean, yeah, of course. I mean, all most good music has elements of repetition. It's just
mm,
something that makes the sound feel organized, as
yeah,
opposed to meandering or noise. But yeah, now that you say that, it does feel like listening to this album a lot of the time. Where we begin is not where we end, and
exactly.
there's a lot of evolution and sparks get lit throughout the song and you kind of
Hmm.
follow those while still keeping us. I mean, it's not it doesn't change up so much that you're like
There's a
uh
logic to it. It's
yeah,
kind of
absolutely.
gradual.
It's
Sometimes it
gradual,
could
right?
be, yeah, sometimes could be abrupt for dramatic purposes, but in general, there is a kind of a logic
Yeah,
to it,
there's
right?
continuity and yeah, you're sort of pulled downstream with all the changes. Uh so Yeah, that's cool. And that does feel cinematic because cinematic music, I think, not only puts you in a space, in a world, but it also evolves, right? And
Yeah.
yeah, and there's usually quite a few different themes and ideas, and things do change. I mean, most cinematic music is not overtly repetitive. It
Hmm.
be as the scenes change, the music
Right.
changes, right? So,
Themes and variations. I think that's always kind of
yeah.
but the other thing is like some people, the interesting thing, some people hear this as experimental or avant-garde. Some people think it's actually too traditional if they're
Hmm.
making noise, like the noise people will think that this is a little commercial. And I'm kind of like somewhere in between. Like I haven't given up on music and composition and melody and structure. And at the same time, I do like exploring some things that are a little bit more open and adventurous and maybe dissonant. But somewhere in the middle, trying to maintain this tense balance between, complete chaos and
Yeah.
structure and organization. But that's where I kind of situate myself.
What are you working on now?
I just released an EP, but I have sort of a back catalog of things that I want to revisit because I've been making this stuff for like 20 plus years. So I have like I think my next project will probably be just revisiting old MIDI compositions from
Mm,
like 20 years ago and
cool.
rearranging them from today's perspective, you know, giving them a new life.
That should be really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, to see, because I think, at the heart of it, I think as composers, your individual composer voice, I think it comes about at a pretty young age, and
Yes.
it's like a lot of you is already there, even though maybe
Yes.
you're more skilled now with other things. So it'll be
Yes.
cool to see what the current you will do with the past ideas, uh, and the current producer, right? Because I do think that those skills
Yes.
definitely improve with time.
No, you're
Uh,
100% correct. I
yeah,
mean, the composer, me when I'm in my 20s, I'm impressed with myself. It's just that I didn't have the technical abilities that I have now.
right.
And that takes time, right? And
It
patience
does.
and all of
It
that.
does. No shortcuts.
And that's why I want to kind of revisit and give them a second life. For people, they're just gonna think this is new stuff that I'm creating out of, but it's
Right.
like a lot of stuff that I'm sitting on that, you know, just I can revisit.
I think
Yeah.
that's great.
But thank you so much. I really appreciate you listening and your feedback. It means a lot and it's great.